Central Committee and others. Mr. Hicks, good morning, and Mr. Wildermuth here on behalf of all defendants, right?
Correct, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Wildermuth. So the case is set for a preliminary injunction hearing. Before we go too far into that, let's just talk about whether there's any procedural questions. Mr. Hicks, anything you want to start off procedurally?
I don't believe so, but you'll be probably pointing out to me where I should ask a question.
I always like to throw the ball in your court first before I pick it up and run it. Mr. Wildermuth, anything you want to talk about first procedurally?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. There's a couple of witness issues. Sorry, Miss Lanham or something?
Lanham.
Yes. Like she had email to the court about a work conflict because of her nursing duties. And then there was a second witness who's a teacher, and you're here also. But the goal is to try to help these witnesses like get in and get out. So there's a couple of ways to do that. First, thank you to the witness for being here. Either call them right away and take them out of order. That's in fact what happens. Or try to figure out if their testimony could be agreed to, where you don't need the testimony, you have what's called stipulation. So do you know what the purpose of the first witness would be? Like what do you want out from that witness?
I think the purpose of my intent is to call Larry Kirksford first, Jenny Lanham second, and to be done with both of them within 5 to 10 minutes per person, just to establish key facts relating to their role in the committee, the appointment process, and the situations involving people that I say we claim allege are illegally appointed.
Okay. Find any heartburn with that, Mr. Wildermuth?
Not that general summary, Your Honor.
Fair enough. Okay, let's get to the witnesses. So who do you want first, Mr. Hicks?
So you want to do witnesses before any openings? Is there an opening?
No, your opening was sending me, as I asked, all the emails and the arguments and the memos and the briefs, and thank you for that. I might let you close.
Okay.
But we're here to get witnesses on and give me a record, so thanks for asking.
Okay, then call Larry Kirksford.
Thank you. Come on up, if you would, please.
Step right up here, please, sir. Around behind you by the chair. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Thank you.
Swearing at this point?
It's up to the judge. Do you want him here at the podium or at the table?
So you can use either. The only thing you can't do is touch a witness or like threaten.
Oh, I just had should be sworn in at the beginning.
Would you spell your last name?
Terpstra, it's Terpstra.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hicks.
Thanks, Blair. So just to get on the record first, what is your name?
Blair Terpstra.
Where do you live?
527 Hamlin Drive, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Your address is in which precinct?
Union Township, P1P.
Have you now...
P as in Paul.
P as in Paul.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you now or ever been a qualified elector in Precinct N?
No.
Okay. Have you ever, as your wife or kids or anybody you know, ever lived in Precinct N?
No.
Do you purport to represent Precinct N on the Republican Central Committee?
According to my understanding of how the committee appoints, makes open appointments, if there hasn't been an election, it makes sense to me, and from my understanding, I am representing, according to the committee, and I'm not sure if this is in their constitution. I'm not sure, exactly of the, legal status of me representing them, but I am appointed to represent Precinct N.
So do you maintain that you represent Precinct N?
Yes.
Okay. You would also maintain that your address is in Precinct P1P?
Yes.
And you're a registered voter in Precinct P1P?
Yes.
Did you run for Precinct N?
I did not.
would you have been able to run for precinct N based on your knowledge?
No,
Did you run for precinct P1P?
I did.
What happened? What was the result of that election?
I lost the election to you, as you know.
Would you say that that voters in precinct P1P are pretty well informed on you and me and the political?
Why does that matter?
Okay, I'll withdraw the question.
Thank you. Next.
Would you say that with both you and me living in precinct P1P, that there is more than one member on the Republican Central Committee who is from precinct P1P?
It's from P1P. So, I mean, in layman's terms, yes, I would say that from P1P, because I think what you're trying to do is look at the statute, the ORCs, and say, you know, what from means. So you're saying, am I from P1P, as in I live there? Yes. So both of us live in P1P, yes.
Okay. Were you present at the meeting at which I was suspended?
I was.
Did you participate in that meeting?
In what way? I was at
Well, some people left.
Oh, okay, yeah, I
stayed.
stayed.
Were you there for the whole meeting?
I was there for the whole meeting.
What was I suspended for?
Generally, I think, from my understanding, it was your speech and behavior against the committee. Again, I really, it was just that, you know, that evening it was brought to my attention, you know, what the allegations were, and I haven't really, you know, looked into it and spent a lot of time thinking about it. But from what I understand, there was some social media posts, and I don't remember if they used any of the emails that you had sent out, but just some communication from you that had been disparaging of the committee, and that was the basis for your suspension, from what I understand.
Okay, and that particular meeting, would you agree it was on September 20th, 2023?
I don't know the exact date, but if that's the date of the meeting, yes.
Okay, did you observe me being unruly, violent, disruptive, or disorderly during that meeting?
I mean, by any legal standards, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if you're talking about, again, some kind of legal standard, but, you know, at numerous meetings, you know, and of course you're not
talking just that meeting.
That meeting, I don't know if you spoke out of turn or anything to that effect at that meeting. I don't recall. You may have, you may not have, but I mean, were you being unruly? I guess it would be, that's subjective. I don't see that, again, I don't know that I can be any kind of, I don't recall if you did or did not, I guess, you know, talk when not given the floor. So that's really all I can say on that. I mean, at that meeting specifically, I do not recall whether or not you spoke out of turn.
But I guess I asked the question, was I unruly? Did I disrupt the meeting? Did I do anything like that? So is there a simpler answer? Yes, no? You're not sure?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Okay. I'm going to have you look at, in the stack that I gave to the judge, Exhibit P, which is the minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
And I actually get this turn Blair to the part that's about the suspension. On there says Exhibit P and what I provided. Do you see any reference in there about me being unruly, disruptive, or anything to that order? And by the way, for the court, it's the second page, and it's in that document. It says, after next CCRC meeting. Well, let me ask before I do this, do you recognize these as the minutes from the meeting?
I'll have to make the assumption that they are.
Would you guys, since it's the same as what you submitted, would you stipulate that these are the minutes from that meeting?
I'm having trouble locating your Exhibit P right now.
P.
P is in Paul, right? What's it look like? I'm having the same problem.
Huh?
What's it look like? I can't find it.
P.
B is in Paul.
P is in Paul.
Paul. Okay, I don't have a P, but tell me what it is.
Can I
wait. Maybe I found it. There it is. Thank you. My apologies.
And it's the page without the, it's the second page on.
Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like they are, yes.
Would you guys stipulate that these are the minutes from the meeting?
It does appear to be, except the meeting minutes from September
So do you see any references in that paragraph under number 14 about any unruly behavior on my part during the meeting?
I do not, no.
Okay. Is your wife work for the prosecutor's office?
She does.
Is she on the Central Committee?
She's not.
Does she have a desire to be appointed judge or elected judge in the future?
Why does it matter?
Because the Central Committee makes recommendations to the governor on judicial appointments, and he's on the Central Committee as a spouse. A lot of these, what I would refer to as sham appointments, are to prop up voting for the endorsement of certain people.
Okay, sustain the objection. That's overlooking, not past.
Okay.
I understand the bias might be there, but it's not.
Okay.
Appropriate question for today.
I have no other questions then.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Mr. Terpstra, you were asked about the September of 2023 meeting during which Mr. Hicks was disciplined. Do you remember that?
Yes.
During that meeting, did Mr. Hicks criticize or in any way speak poorly of the committee members, those endorsed by the committee, or office holders that are Republicans in the county?
I can't say that I specifically remember his speech at that meeting, but I know, in the past, at meetings, out of turn, he has spoken to such things. But again, I don't know specifically at that meeting if it occurred.
Very good. Thank you. That's all, Your Honor.
Redirect, Mr. Hicks.
You said that at other meetings you felt I spoke out of turn?
Yes.
And I was critical of the party or the committee?
Yes.
Do you feel that being critical of a committee within a committee environment is normal or abnormal?
I'm sorry, can you
within
ask
the
the
four
question
walls of the committee? Do you feel that committee members expressing criticism, like we should spend more money on this, we should spend more money on this, we're not doing this right, is normal or abnormal?
Normal.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Mr. Waterman?
Nothing else, Your Honor.
Mr. Terpstra, thanks for being here. Our work isn't always convenient, but it's necessary. So I apologize for any inconvenience. Take that to the principal and help you.
Thank you.
Get out of here. You can stick around, whatever works.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Next witness.
Anyway.
Step up to the chair, ma'am. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Thank you.
Can you state for the record your name?
Jennifer Lanham,
And where do you live?
5225 State Route 132, Batavia, Ohio, 45103.
As it relates to the Clermont County Republican Central Committee, what's your role?
I'm on the executive committee and the central committee.
What makes you be on the executive committee?
I was elected, to be on the central committee.
What makes you be on the executive committee?
The people in the central committee, the other precincts, we decided who became the exec.
I'm confused. I thought you were the executive specifically for Stone Lake Township. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, I am.
How many people are on the committee from Stone Lake Township?
I believe 6.
So could you describe very quickly for the court how the committee's organized in terms of committees like Stone Lake Township and the overall committee and executives being from townships?
Explain what?
Could you explain just organizationally the concept for the court of executives and being a township executive versus, say, being the central committee chair? What are township executives? How is it structured within the Clermont County Republican Central Committee?
I can speak for me as a township representative. I answer any questions any of the voters have. A lot of my relatives and friends call me at election day and say, who do I vote for?
I'm asking more organizationally.
No, I can't. I don't have the stuff in front of me.
So
I didn't know this was going to be a quiz on the organization.
Well, I'm not meaning to be a quiz. I would just think you would know the basics of the organization if you're an executive.
I do.
Okay, so how is the organization structured?
I'm sure it's in print somewhere. How many people have it right off their head? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
You can't remember, okay. I'm going to have you look at Exhibit E. So, Your Honor, it's Exhibit E in the stack that I gave you. And I'm going to flip it. It looks like a spreadsheet. I'm going to direct you to that part right there. And do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document?
It's the list of all the members of the Central Committee.
Okay, I just would like to stipulate with you guys this list. I think the one that you sent in was actually an older one. It's not as up to date as this one. This is the most recent one.
Apologize, Your Honor, I'm not sure what I'm being asked to stipulate.
That this list, Exhibit E, is a accurate representation of the member list of the Pembroke County Republican
I don't
Central
believe it's
Committee.
the most current list from what I understand.
I believe it is, but would you guys then produce your exhibit that's the most current list? That you're prepared to certify as being the correct list?
Well, what I produced, because I thought it was what His Honor was requesting, was the list that was submitted to the State Central Committee last year.
Well, the
That's
member,
what I produced.
So let's do it this way.
The members
Make
of this
it-
change.
Mr. Hicks, to make it easy, he didn't have to agree to anything. You have to establish. So this has a date of July 2020.
yeah, this is
right?
the list that was sent
So it's a list from July
by the
2020.
Secretary of the Party, Christy Broussard, and I printed it out and put it in the exhibit stack.
Okay, like he didn't have to agree to anything.
I want to make sure, I'm sorry, but I want to be
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at that section that has Stone Lake Township, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, how many people are on the committee from Stone Lake Township?
5.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 6.
do all of those people live in their precincts?
No.
Which ones don't?
Let's see. Charles and Leslie. And it's up for debate about Brady. And
Would have to be up for debate.
well, at the last meeting, or at the last election, or endorsement it was.
Okay, so I checked all those names against the voter records for what precincts they lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one that showed in the voter records is not living in their precinct was Leslie Knepper. Do you believe
Okay.
I'm wrong, or like Charles Tassel, I remember checking him specifically, and he lived in his precinct. It was Leslie Knepper, precinct D. We can move on, but do you know who Bill Shields is?
I do.
Do you know what precincts Bill Shields lives in?
I don't remember. No. I don't know.
Was Bill Shields on the committee for the last term?
He was.
Okay. And you don't remember what precinct he represented?
I don't.
As
I have a
executive?
list at home that I go by.
Okay. Did Bill Shields ask you recently about rejoining the committee?
He did.
And what was your response to him?
I told him that we appointed members. There weren't any. I try to fill them as soon as there's a vacancy. There's not a lot of people pounding down the door to join the Central Committee.
So, Bill Shields lives in Precinct D, was previously on the committee from Precinct D, and Leslie Knepper doesn't live in Precinct D, Do you think that he has a right to be able to represent precinct D if he wishes, since he lives there?
Objection. Calls for a legal
Sustained.
Okay. Do you believe that Leslie Knepper is legally serving on the?
Didn't you just tell me that she is?
That she doesn't live in the precinct. Yeah. So I don't want to ask you to make a legal conclusion. So you'll stipulate that you told Bill Shields that he was not able to rejoin the committee because there were no
There
open
weren't
seats.
any positions.
Okay. No other questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Wilderman.
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
But you don't get to run away that fast because I get asked questions.
Oh, okay.
I just want to make sure I understood the testimony. Sometimes the form of the question takes me astray and I miss the answer. Of the 5 precinct openings, if you will, in Stone Lake Township, you're saying 4 of the 5 representatives live elsewhere.
Yes.
And is it your responsibility to fill vacancies?
Yes.
What's the process of you filling vacancies?
I look at the list of the people in the precincts and try and find somebody that I might know. I can't remember some of these people, I believe, asked if they could be on the central committee. Others, I knew going down the list. I can tell you, I know Brady Newcomb, he asked if he could be on the central committee because he had moved from Warren County and wanted to be on the central committee again. Like I said, we had a lot of openings. There aren't a lot of people that apply to run. I don't think they're aware that they can run. Maybe if they knew, they'd join us. I wish they would. But the reason Bill Shields is not on this now is that he did not file his petition to be on the election. He didn't get he didn't have the sufficient amount of signatures on his petition. So that's why he is not on there now. It's by his own lack of diligence.
On this list, there's a column that has initial and E, like in the 3rd column,
Yes.
denotes executive committee. Is that what that means?
Executive.
Right. Do you have an office with the executive committee or just a member of the executive committee?
I'm just a member. I don't.
Okay. And then how is it that you were picked, asked, or drafted to fill vacancies? Like you didn't just start doing that for the fun of it. Did you?
It's just what we do.
Yeah, no, I get it. Nobody's saying anything wrong happened, but it's like you just decided to do it with the chairman of the executive committee or the executive committee officers asked you to do it, or you've always done it, so we always do it that way?
Yeah,
Pretty
pretty much.
Okay. And you don't hold any office on the executive committee, you're just a member.
I'm a member of the executive committee. Yes, I go to the executive committee meetings.
Right. Does that bring up any questions, Mr. Wilderman, first?
No, Your Honor.
How about, thank you, Mr. Hicks, that bring up any questions?
Yes, one. Do you believe that you're an elected member?
I am.
Do you believe as an elected member you're in an elected office?
Yes.
I checked and very quickly, Your Honor, I checked and Leslie Knepper, I believe, lives in precinct B. If that's the case, she obviously lives in some other precinct. Would you believe that then if that's correct, that there's more than one person from precinct B on the committee?
I don't know.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Wilderman?
No, Your Honor.
So now you can run out of here. Thank you for your appearance today.
Okay.
Whatever inconvenience it might have caused is how the system works, so thank you for being here. Mr. Hicks, next.
Jeff Corcoran.
So, Mr. Corcoran, you're a lawyer?
Your Honor.
So you don't take an oath because you did years ago when you promised to uphold the Constitution as an officer of the court. So you you sit down without an oath, but I just remind you that you did it years ago, and you got more than just testimony in your mind. You have an officer of the court obligation.
Yes, Your Honor, I understand.
That's why we don't do it. It would be an insult to make you take an oath. Go ahead, Mr. Hicks.
Mr. Corcoran, what is
First, give me your first full name.
Jeff Corcoran, Your Honor.
and where do you live?
6177 State Route 132, Goshen, Ohio 45122.
And in what precinct is that?
It's in Precinct E in Goshen.
Okay. And you're an elected member.
Correct.
By the way, if you were to move from Precinct E, you said it was, Goshen Precinct E,
Precinct E, yes.
to a different precinct, would you lose your seat on the Republican Central Committee?
I would.
Okay. If Blair Terpstra, who is appointed to represent Precinct N, but actually lives in Precinct P1P, moved to a different precinct, would he lose his seat in Precinct N?
He would.
Okay. Is the Clermont, how would you define explain what is the Clermont County Republican Party versus the Central Committee versus the Executive Committee?
Well, Your Honor, please excuse me if I'm being a little redundant, but I guess I'll try and do the best I can as quickly as I can.
Redundant is what lawyers do, so I would get it.
I'll try and get right to it. There are 168 precincts in Clermont County.
I want you to respond to my question. What's the difference?
Well, let him try to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The 168 representatives of those precincts constitutes the Central Committee or the Controlling Committee. The Executive Committee is made up of one representative of each township and each city. There's 16 of them. And then the so-called Clermont County Republican Party is the name of the group of everyone, I guess, that represents or forms this controlling committee / executive committee. That's referred to as the Clermont County Republican Party.
Okay, so it's not your belief that the party is any person who votes in the primaries of the party?
I'm not sure I understand.
A member of the party is any person that essentially shows as a Republican in the Secretary of State voter database, that they're a member.
So if you vote Republican in a primary, is that part of the Clermont County Republican Party? Is that your
No, I'm
question?
asking, is that the definition under oath? Is that, I'm asking if you see that as being the Republican Party membership is everybody who votes in a Republican primary.
I would say that if you vote in a Republican primary, you can call yourself a Republican. I don't know that makes you part of the party.
Okay. Who gets to elect the members of the Central Committee?
People that vote and declare they are drawing a Republican ballot get to cast a vote for a representative in the precinct.
Is it a fair representation that the members of the party get to elect the Central Committee?
Well, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, it's probably true, but I don't think it's an accurate description. I think you're a Republican if you vote in a Republican primary. I don't think that makes you part of the Republican Party.
Well, then who then gets to elect who gets to elect the Central Committee then?
If you vote in a Republican primary and take out a Republican ballot, you'll get to vote for someone to represent you, if you choose to, in that precinct, as being on in the Republican Party on the Central Committee.
And don't you get to do other things too, like you get to vote on who will be the presidential candidate, who will be the county commissioner, who will be in the primary?
For Republicans, yes.
So is it a fair representation that party members get to vote in the primary, where they pick who will be in general elections, and they get to pick who is their states, who represents them as a Central Committee and a state Central Committee? Well,
yes, party members get to do that, but just because you do that doesn't put you in the party.
Well, what does it make you then?
A Republican.
And what's the difference between being a Republican the way you're describing it versus being a member of the Republican Party?
The Republican Party is made up of the members of the Central Committee who may have dual functions as members of the Executive Committee. That's the Republican Party in Clermont County.
So the Republican Party is the Central Committee and the Executive Committee?
It is the Central Committee, which is the controlling committee, and it is also members of the Executive Committee, which are serving a dual function. The controlling committee in Ohio is the Central Committee.
And who's allowed to be on the Central Committee?
The people on the Central Committee are those that get elected and appointed to represent a precinct in Clermont County.
So if somebody came forward and just said, I want to be, it's a free association, I just want to be on this, would you tell them they can be part of the Central Committee or they can't be part of the Central Committee?
Well, I don't get to tell them anything. It's up to the Central Committee to determine whether they're someone that they want to put on the committee.
Now, let me ask my question more clearly.
Okay.
If I brought 10 of my buddies from my neighborhood, all from precinct P1P, and they all said, we want to be part of the party or the Central Committee or however you describe it, would you tell them they can be or they can't be?
I wouldn't tell them either one. They're certainly eligible to come before the committee, be vetted, and voted on.
So is precinct P1P already have an elected member?
What's your
Does
question?
precinct P1P where I live already have an elected member?
Yes.
Do you ever vet people for precincts that are already filled or only in the case when there's an observed vacancy in a precinct?
Well, if people file a petition, there's no vetting that's involved. They file a petition and they run, and if they get elected, then they're automatically on the controlling committee.
My specific example, though, was related to people trying to get appointed.
Okay.
I bring 10 of my buddies, they say they just want to be on. So in that scenario, we know that precinct P1P already has an elected member. I bring 10 of my buddies because you talked about vetting before the committee and then you talked about petitions, okay?
Right.
So you were talking about appointments versus petitions, at one point, and then you switched gears. My question is if I brought 10 of my buddies to a meeting and they said they want to be part of the committee, would you let them? Would you even let them be vetted?
Well, is your question, they want to be members of the Central Committee from P1P or just anywhere?
They just come in the door and say, I want to be a member
Okay.
of the Central Committee.
Then in P1P Union Township, which is where you're from, if there were 10 precincts that were vacant in Union Township and you brought 10 of your buddies in, which you've done, to say we want to be appointed, then the committee could decide whether or not to appoint those 10 people to the vacant precincts.
And I want to object to something you said. I've never brought somebody to the committee.
Okay.
So so I just want to clarify, I've never done that. Can you point to an instance where I've done that?
You did it with Bill Thomas. When you were the executive of Union Township, you can't,
I want to move on, but that's not true.
Objection, Your Honor. You should have a right to answer the
He
question.
does, finish up. Otherwise, I got to do it later, so just do it now.
you were the executive of Union Township. You brought people in to have vacancies filled in precincts where they didn't live.
Okay. I'm just going to move on. And so,
I'm just going to interrupt.
yes, sir.
You just said that somebody who doesn't reside in that precinct, but in that township, would be eligible for appointment within that township elsewhere, right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
What's the basis for that conclusion?
If no one runs in the precinct,
I understand what it is, but are you just making it up as you go along? Is there a constitution? Is there a statute
Yeah.
provision?
no, there's a constitution and it's spelled out in the Constitution, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Would you, now where you have Blair Terpstra and I both being from P1P, would you say that there's more than one member on the committee who are from P1P?
Well, you're saying he lives in P1P, so do you. So yes, there's more than one person that lives in P1P on the committee.
And you heard him testify that he represents Precinct N.
Yes?
Do you believe that he's removed from Precinct N? With the definition of removed meaning no longer lives there, doesn't maintain a qualification of an elector in Precinct N?
Well, he's not qualified to vote in Precinct N, correct. He doesn't live there, correct. But he works that precinct on behalf of the Republican Party.
Well, you said that if Blair Terpstra moved from P1P to some other precinct, He moved
Yes.
from P1P to, he would lose his seat for precinct N.
No, I understood you to ask me if he moved from N, where he is appointed, would he lose that seat if he moved out of N?
So let me ask my question again so it's very clear, and I want to ask the question I asked before that. I'm the elected representative of P1P. If I move from P1P to another precinct, do I lose my seat?
Yes.
Okay. Blair Terpstra is an appointed person. He lives in precinct P1P, but he claims to represent precinct N. If he moves from precinct P1P to some other precinct, does he lose his seat in precinct N?
I see. I think if he stays in Union Township, he would not lose his appointment to precinct N.
So then why couldn't I move from precinct P1P and continue to be the person for precinct P1P?
The Constitution says you're not. You're out.
So you think that's because of our Constitution? Does it say that in our Constitution?
I believe so.
Can I'm going to hand you a copy of our Constitution. In the stack of papers that I gave you, Your Honor, this is one that has an exhibit at the top of it that is unmarked. It says at the top, it's in the stack, Constitution of the Republican Party toward the back. Yep. Yes. And
What's the exhibit number?
I'm going to hand it to you, Jeff.
Oh.
It needs a number, so do you have a number in mind?
Well, I was using letters, and
I'm sorry, you did.
Critique. Yeah,
What's
if it was a letter, it would be T.
T for Tom?
Yeah, if we were just going with the letters that I've used.
Thank you.
Can you identify where in there it says that a member loses their seat when they move? I guess it's specifically that an elected member loses their seat, but an appointed member doesn't lose their seat as long as they stay in the same township, which was your testimony.
Yes. What am I looking for? Am I looking for elected or appointed? What do you want me to look for? Okay.
Anywhere in the Constitution where it describes what happens when you move and describes the situations in which you lose your seat versus when you don't lose your seat.
There on page 3 of the Constitution, towards the bottom, it references the process of filling vacancies in precincts.
Where does it describe the process of how you lose a seat in a precinct?
Yeah, I'm looking. I do not see it. There may not be anything about moving out of the precinct in this old Constitution. I know that we spent about a year.
Is there a different Constitution?
Say again?
You said this old Constitution.
Yes, we spent about a year trying to redo this Constitution, and this may have been language in the new one and not adopted, so it might not be there.
Okay. So you stipulate that it's not there.
Well, I don't see it. I mean, this.
Are you aware of the statutory reason somebody loses their seat?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, so
I know that as a matter of practice, what we have done is if you move out of your precinct, you are no longer on the central committee or no longer a member of the central committee.
Okay. I'm going to look, I'm going to have him look, Your Honor, at this exhibit, which is a certified copy of some of the statutes printed out. It's in the part that doesn't have letters yet. This would be what you.
First page says
Constitution.
Article 15, Section 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to hand this to you, Mr. Corcoran, and I'm looking for my other copy, but I kind of underlined there that so I'll stipulate that this is a certified copy that I printed out from the governmental website of the statute.
Sure.
And if you look at that section there, I kind of marked it a little bit as I handed it to you.
Yes.
What page are you on?
On 35175, it's the last one, 0.05. It's the last page of that.
Thank you.
Okay. And towards, I'm looking at his, maybe halfway in the text, there's, in the first big paragraph, a couple lines up, there's the statutory reasons why people lose their seat.
I see it.
Okay, so there's 4 reasons there. Can you see the 4 reasons?
I do.
And what are they?
Death, resignation, failure to elect, or removal from the precinct, ward, or township, or district from which the committeeman was chosen.
Okay, so what do you interpret the word removal to mean?
Well, if someone gets removed from their precinct for, I guess, any variety of reasons, I mean, if you move out of your precinct, you're removing yourself from the precinct. If you, in my opinion, if you behave in a way that is contrary to the beliefs of the Republican Party and the party votes you out, you can be removed. So,
well, but it doesn't say removal from the committee, does it? What does it actually say?
Removal from the precinct. So you certainly moving out of the precinct is a removal.
Right. That's, I believe, I'm putting forward, I'm asking that removal from the precinct is speaking of moving, ceasing to be a qualified elector in the precinct.
Okay.
And I want to just stipulate that you mentioned that it could be removed from the committee, but the statutory language, would you agree, doesn't contain the word removed from committee?
It doesn't.
Okay. In that sense, in the Constitution you have in front of you,
Yes.
which is now going to be Exhibit T, that we did, by the way, that Constitution, we stipulate that's the same version that you guys submitted to the court?
I can't.
Hit your page numbers at the bottom of CC, page 127.
Right. I don't know. It could be or could not be.
Well, I'll stipulate that I printed this.
Mr. Hicks, stipulate has a particular terminology and legal meaning. It's actually like, will you agree? So stipulations become matters of evidence without further proof. I don't think Mr. Wildermuth's interested in stipulating to things he's not sure of. If you use stipulate in a different manner, I think.
Okay.
So it's a term of art for the lawyers. That's why nobody seems to want to agree. So if you use a different word, it might be easier.
Well, I will represent that I printed this from the email that you sent yesterday, Mr. Wildermuth, with your page numbers at the bottom of it. Okay. So within that Constitution as well, can you point to any section of it that addresses discipline of elected or appointed members?
There's nothing in the Constitution that addresses discipline.
Okay. Are you aware of any statute that provides for the suspension or removal of an elected member of a central committee?
Well, let me maybe clarify my prior answer. Our Constitution does also include language that incorporates Robert rules into our activities. And certainly in Robert's rules, there are plenty of language in Robert's rules about discipline. So in that regard, discipline is included in the Constitution. Now, what was your follow-up question?
Well, can you find in here the section that stipulates that says we follow Robert's rules? I should have had it marked so I could point right to it.
And let me also mention that I'm not sure this is the complete document that's been adopted, to tell you the truth, because we clearly, and I can't find it off the top of my head where it does address Robert's rules being part of this, but it is part of what it is part of what our Constitution says, but I can't see it in this. So it must not be, this must not be a complete document. I don't know, maybe, I mean, Byron is the expert on Robert's rules. He probably knows
well,
where
you
it is.
just represented that the Constitution says we follow Robert's rules.
I didn't.
I'm just looking for where it is. I was just trying to find where it is in there. It is in there. I just haven't marked it. So for sake of discussion right now, let me ask you a question. At the very beginning of the Constitution, can you read the first two lines?
Are you talking about starting with the duly?
Yeah.
The duly elected members of the Clermont County Republican Central Committee, in accordance with the statutes of the state of Ohio, hereby make, ordain, and establish the Constitution of the Republican Party of Clermont County, Ohio.
Okay, so that also refers to statutes.
Yes, it does.
They also duly elected members.
Yeah.
Okay. What does duly elected mean?
Well, if you are an elected, you know what it means. If you're an elected precinct executive, then you are part of the Central Committee.
Okay.
It also means that the statutes apply. It also means that Robert's rules apply. Robert's rules.
If I could find it in here, or somebody give me a hint, because I remember reading it, part on what Robert's rules says. Robert's rules subject to state law. Robert's rules and state law, but we can't find it, so I can move on, unless you want to look anymore to try to find where it says.
This is your time, Mr. Hicks. I'm
just asking you to. You made the representation on it.
Yeah, it's in there. I know we have Robert's rules.
Do you believe that the adherence to Robert's rules is limited by state law at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
State law governs.
Okay. Is an elected office is a Central Committee member an elected office in Ohio?
Is a state Central Committee?
No. Is a county Central Committee member an elected office in Ohio?
Well, you're elected to the position, but whether it's an elected office is another question. I believe it is not considered an elective office.
Okay, so I want to direct you to look at Exhibit B. And if I find it here, I'm going to give you. So this has been the front part of the B.
I have it here.
So you have it.
Yeah.
I forgot that I gave it to you. So see the line. You see where it says, I, Blair, would you, this is Blair Kirk's petition, which I got from the Board of Elections and printed out.
Okay.
You see where it says, I, Blair Kirk, or see where he wrote his name there?
Where you highlighted it?
Okay, highlighted.
Okay, yeah, I see I, Blair.
Let me switch with you, because I did that one where I had highlighted for myself. So the highlighted, if you remember where the highlighted part was that I had added, what does that say? It starts with I further.
Further declare that I desire to be a candidate for election to the office of member of the Clermont County Central Committee.
I think you read it wrong. Why don't you try it again?
I further declare that I desire to be a candidate for election to the office of member of the Clermont County Central Committee as a member of the Republican Party.
So do you believe that that says it's an elected office?
No, it is not an elective office. You're elected to that position, but it is not considered an elective office.
Based on what?
Based on the statute.
What statute?
It says members of the controlling committee, the Central Committee, are not considered elected office holders.
Where?
I don't have the statutes in front of me.
Real quick, an objection. Today's hearing is about gathering facts and evidence, not about debating legal principles that are, of course, the prerogative. So I'll object on that ground.
When you have time, Mr. Hicks, look at 351701 for definitions. I'm following your argument. I understand the answer. The layman's understanding and the statutory understanding use the same words and have different meanings. So you can ask another question.
What's the, I saw on your brief, what's the difference between an elected office and a public office?
Well, if you're a public office holder, then you are elected to serve the public in a government position. You're not if you're a precinct committeeman.
So isn't there clear legal definition, for example, that a public office is subject to the Open Meetings Act, for example, or to the Public Records Act?
Sure.
Objection. Say objection.
Okay.
Overruled. I understand your argument.
Sure.
Okay. But you would deny that Central Committee members are elected office holders, but not public office holders.
They are elected to a party position. So you're saying just because you get elected, that makes you a public office holder or some government office holder or an elected official, and that's not true.
I didn't say that.
Okay, well.
Okay, so I get the argument.
Okay.
The next fact.
So what was I suspended for?
I can't speak for how the committee voted or why. I didn't even vote, as a matter of fact. But I know that there were a large number of allegations. In the report that I provided, which became the stimulus for the motion to discipline you, there were two things that were used as an example, and there could have been 100, but there were two. Those were you taunting the Democrats to run candidates against our Republican candidates, and the second part of that was you mocking and ridiculing Republican donors. But once the discussion started, there were 10, 20, 30 other allegations made by members, and the membership voted for you to be suspended. I did not vote, but I was, as chairman, I was conducting the vote.
So your basis for that was that Robert's rules allowed that?
Robert's Rules of Order allowed that, yes.
So is there a vacancy in precinct P1P?
Not that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't know, but there may be. But you're a suspended member, but you are still a member. You just cannot participate in the business dealings of the party. You are allowed to participate in any statutory, currently anyway, you're allowed to participate in any statutory responsibilities.
Can you list off statutory responsibilities?
Yeah, filling vacancies in a government office like one of the elected positions in the county.
So doesn't statute allow the Central Committee to define the Executive Committee?
The Central Committee does appoint to the Executive Committee. That's correct.
They define the membership requirements for the Executive Committee.
Well, yes, they do.
Is that a statutory function?
Appointing an Executive Committee?
No, setting the criteria for who's on the composition of the
It is.
Executive Committee.
It is.
Okay, so then that would be a statutory function.
No, the statutory response, that's a party activity. You know, the Central Committee gets to determine, there are a lot of things that we do, but we get to determine who's on the Executive Committee, and if there is any role for the Executive Committee to perform, it gets decided by the Central Committee.
By what authority do you make those definitions?
by the authority of the statutes.
So then isn't it a statutory function to define the composition of the executive committee?
Well, you can say that everything that the party does is a statutory function, but it is not.
Okay. So do you submit your roster in governing documents of the Secretary of State?
We submit them to the Board of Elections, I believe, and then the Board of Elections may send them to the Secretary of State.
Do you have the copy of the law handout that I gave you?
Copy of what?
Still, the ones that had the law where we looked at the statute 37-1505 or 35-1705.
Is there an exhibit number?
It would be, it's you. We wrote it.
Oh, yeah, okay, got it.
So if you open that up, there's 35-1702. And I believe down at the bottom of it, it talks about sending in your documents. What does it say?
Each political party shall file with the Office of the Secretary of State a copy of its Constitution and bylaws, if any, within 30 days of adoption or amendment. Each party shall also file with the Office of the Secretary of State a list of members of its controlling committee and other party officials within 30 days of their election or appointment.
Do you allow more than one committeeman to be from a given precinct?
Well, there may be more than one committeeman that lives in the same precinct, but they do not, two people don't represent the same precinct.
Well, what's the definition of the word from?
Well, if you live in precinct P1P and your wife lives in P1P and there's a vacancy in another precinct and your wife is willing to help us and nobody has run in that precinct, she'll come before the committee, and if the committee thinks it's appropriate and they vet that person, they'll vote to appoint them to cover a different precinct. That's the process.
I don't know that that was the definition of the word from.
Well, that's what happens with the Clermont County Republican Party.
Okay, so if I use the traditional word definition of the word from, meaning has provenance from, is located in, that type of definition, would you say that you allow more than one member to be from a given precinct?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion, interpretation of statutory language.
I'll allow the answer not as the ultimate determination, but his idea of what he means. It's not binding on the court, obviously, right? Overruled. Go ahead, tell me what you think it means.
Thank you. So is your question, if two people live in the same precinct, one of them is responsible for that precinct they live in, and the other one is responsible for another precinct, that's exactly what we do.
But that wasn't my question.
What's your question? Because
So my question is, either based on the definition of the word from, meaning has provenance from is located in, do you allow more than one person to be from a given precinct on the committee?
Sure.
Do you use Secretary of State prescribed petition forms?
You're talking about me personally? Yes.
Okay. And what do you use them for as it relates to the committee?
If it's a petition to run for elective office as a precinct committeeman, that's what they're used for.
So elected office as a precinct committeeman.
Correct.
Do you do any action if the Board of Elections disqualifies somebody from running for not doing their petition properly, as we all heard Jenny Lanham testify to that Bill Shields could not run because he did his petition improperly?
We don't do anything.
Okay. Do you believe that's wrong for a government entity to not let somebody run because they did a petition wrong?
Objection.
It's not.
Do you follow state mandated terms of office, being either 2 or 4 years?
Well, members of the committee either run for a 2-year or a 4-year, and if it's a 4-year, then we serve 4 years. If it's 2-year, we serve 2 years.
What, both? Wait, you're saying it's both?
No, it's not. It's one or the other.
I know, so what is it?
Well,
Here,
for us,
Clermont County.
4 years.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have an executive committee?
Yes.
Why do you have an executive committee?
Well, in our Constitution, the executive committee gets to monitor and approve expenditures.
That's not why you have an executive committee. Or is that your reason? We have them only because they approve expenditures?
Well, we have an executive committee because we're authorized by statute to appoint one. The duties of the executive committee are determined by the central committee.
How about the duty of, doesn't the executive committee have a duty under statute to make recommendations for members of the Board of Elections?
They do.
Okay, so if you didn't have an executive committee, who would make recommendations for the Board of Elections then?
Well, I don't know. We have an executive committee, so I don't have to worry about that.
Would you say that statute requires you to have an executive committee?
Truthfully, I don't know. I'd have to see if there is a requirement of an executive committee, but I know it's authorized by statute, and I know that we do it.
Do you appoint members who are not possessed of the qualifications of an elector or the qualifications as specified in the Secretary of State handbook for representing precincts?
Let me stop you and let you start over again. You kind of lost me. Go.
Do you appoint members?
When you say me, are you talking about the central committee?
Does the central committee appoint members? Thank you for clarification. Does the central committee appoint members who are not possessed of the qualifications of an elector to represent precincts?
I think that we appoint people to represent the Republican Party in precincts in which they do not live. Yes.
Okay. If today a person that lives in precinct N wished to be on the committee where Blair Terpstra is appointed to represent but doesn't live there, would the person that lives in precinct N have any pathway to represent precinct N?
Sure.
What would that pathway be?
Blair would resign from his precinct appointment. We would then appoint that person to N. Now, whether he resigns or doesn't, that's not an issue we've been faced with. Well, we have been faced with it actually, and the person did resign, and we did some shuffling to get the person who lived in the precinct to represent his precinct.
Okay. In the Constitution that you provided, can you flip to, this one I have cribbed here. It's going to be, I have it cribbed here if I can find it. Article 3, Section 1J. So Article 3, that starts on page 5 in that document. Section 1J is on page 8. On your number on the bottom of your pages, it's CCRCC 128.
Okay, got it.
It says, can you read J?
The decision to endorse any candidate shall be made according to the endorsement policy adopted by the Clermont County Republican Central Committee on September 16, 2015.
Okay. And I'm going to present to you now an exhibit that for my list would become V. And that's the 2016.
What's the exhibit number?
It's going to be V. It's one of those unmarked. It says endorsement policy at the top.
This is a strange room. I might be the oldest person here, so act like I can't tell the difference between boy and David.
Okay.
B and D.
P. This is going to be, it's not currently numbered, but it's going to be V.
Victor?
Victor. Yes.
Military had it right.
Okay. And it says at the top, Your Honor, endorsement policy. And I'm going to hand you a copy so you can look at it.
Thank you.
So I printed that document from the documents that Mr. Wildermuth sent. And you see your numbering down at the bottom where it says CCRCC 142. And the file name of the file that he sent was endorsement policy 9-16-15. So is this that endorsement policy that the Constitution says is used for endorsements?
Well, okay, is there something, I don't know, I believe it is, but I don't know. Looks like it, but is there a specific section?
Well, I'm going to ask you to go look at the Constitution again, and then we'll drill into it real quick, Jeff.
Okay.
In the Constitution, if you go back in that document, So it's the one, Your Honor, we labeled T. It has, after kind of it's over, there's a section that says endorsement procedure.
Okay.
Okay? And you would agree that endorsement procedure is a different title than endorsement policy.
Yes.
Okay? And so now go back and, well, let's look at the endorsement procedure. And let's look at section 3 in the Constitution one. Section 3 of the endorsement procedure, which Your Honor is page 134 on their numbers, CCRCC 134. And in bold it says there, you can prick out pretty quickly on that one.
Okay, let's back up. Where are we?
Exhibit T, so the Constitution.
Yeah.
Your page number, 134, CCRCC 134.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay, and then you see where it's bolded at least 60% of the vote?
Yes.
Okay. Down below a couple lines there, it says after the first round of voting. Can you read that? That sentence?
After the first round of voting, if no ballot choice receives at least 60% of the vote, then the two ballot choices receiving the most votes will proceed to a second ballot.
Okay. Now let's go look at the one that says endorsement policy at the top.
Okay.
That I said was going to be, this is Victor, ultimately going to be Victor.
Yeah.
The one where the title and the file name matches the description of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And if you look on that one and it says CCRCC 143, it's your
Right. Yeah, this
page
is
number is CCRCC 143. At the bottom of page where it says CCRCC 143, then you can see again, if you look at, there's no bolding, but there's a section that starts towards the bottom. With each round of voting, the candidate with the fewest number of votes, can you read that sentence?
Sure. Each candidate for any office shall become...
No. The sentence that starts with each round of voting. At the bottom of CCRCC 143. Last paragraph, a little more than halfway through that paragraph.
With each round of voting, the candidate with the fewest number of votes will be dropped from subsequent ballots. In the event of a tie for the least number of votes, all of the candidates in that tied last position will be dropped from subsequent ballots, as long as two candidates still remain.
So what you read from the first one said after the first round of voting, if no vote gives 60%, all but the first two will be dropped. This one describes the process of dropping one at a time.
Yes, this is the older process. This was revised to the one that is on 134 is the new version of the endorsement process.
So let's go back to the Constitution. Article, whatever I said was the article we looked at in the Constitution. Article 3, I think I said. Article 3.
Okay.
Section 1J. This is your submitted Constitution. Doesn't it say there, adopted by the Clermont County Republican Central Committee on September 16th, 2015?
Yeah, it does.
So doesn't the Constitution say that you're supposed to be using the endorsement policy that was adopted on September 16th, 2015?
Well, this was the Constitution. This is an amendment to the Constitution, and the more recent endorsement policy is what we followed in the last endorsement process.
Well, how do you have an amendment to a Constitution but not actually change the Constitution to reflect the amendment?
Well, I think the Constitution should have been amended to reflect that.
Okay, what if I said, based on reading this, I don't think it was ever properly adopted?
Well, I think you're probably right. Of course, you were one of the ones that objected to amending the Constitution, but you're probably right. That needs to be fixed to be in conjunction with the endorsement policy.
So I'm probably right that the endorsement policy that was used for the most recent endorsement meeting was never properly adopted?
No, what you're probably right about is that the language in the Constitution should reflect the new endorsement policy. And that language about a date of the endorsement policy should be removed.
So go back to the beginning of the Constitution.
Yeah.
The very front page. So doesn't that have dates when the Constitution was modified and when it was effective? Wasn't there a log there?
Well, on the page that you're showing, there is a log. Those are not the only amendments that were made. There are other amendments that were made that aren't reflected in that first page log.
So is it normal to have constitutions where amendments are made that aren't in the constitutions and aren't reflected as being ever a change to the Constitution?
Mr. Hicks, I was elected in June of 22, and we immediately started to fix the Constitution with all of these different discrepancies.
So you would, when that was process of the Constitution was taking place, you would acknowledge that there are issues with the Constitution?
There are.
Have you said in meetings before that there are issues with the Constitution's compliance with the Ohio Revised Code?
There are.
What are examples of that?
Well, I would have to go back and start going through it page by page, but I know one such discrepancy is that the statute says that the executive committee must be elected by the central committee. That's not a process that we follow. We actually allow the individual townships to elect their execs, and it's never ratified by the central committee. So that's one example.
Okay, so let's take that example. So you believe that it would be prudent for the members to modify the Constitution to reflect the election of executive committee members consistent with statute?
Sure.
So why wouldn't that also apply to the appointment of members to fill vacancies?
I think there should be better language in our Constitution about that.
Do you think it's improper to appoint people to fill vacancies that are where they don't have the qualifications of elector?
Absolutely not.
So you believe that you should change the Constitution for the statute about how the government says executive committee members should be elected to the executive committee.
I do.
But not change the Constitution to reflect that people have to have the qualifications of office to represent a precinct.
Well, I think that the Constitution should clearly say that appointed members, or that we may appoint members to do everything in the Republican Party except for statutory duties of appointing elected officials that need to have a vacancy filled.
But then would those people be under that formula of creating a different type of role than when I brought my 10 buddies in, and they couldn't be I'll use the word statutory committee member, but they could be this role you're talking about?
Well, again, you're using the word statutory committee member, and I'm using the word Republican committee member because they're working for the Republican Party, filling a vacancy that never gets filled.
I don't know about it never getting filled. Didn't we just have testimony that Bill Shields asked to represent his precinct where he lives and was told by Jenny Lanham that he couldn't because it was filled by somebody who doesn't live in the precinct?
After the election, Mr. Hicks, we had about 120 elected precinct executives and about 48 vacancies that we could not find people to represent us or run for office. And we began the process of filling them. We filled them with whoever would work for the Republican Party, and it's worked pretty well for us. I wish we had better language in our Constitution that allowed for their activity and appointment, with the exception of statutory duties appointing elected officials in a vacancy situation.
What do you see the role of a central committee member as? You kind of describe it as being a volunteer for the Republican Party, but then you talk about certain functions like selecting whether we have 2 or 4 year terms, or who we recommend for the judicial appointment. How would you describe that role of a central committee member?
Well, I think the role of the central committee member really is one of being, primarily anyway, and there's a lot of roles. Primarily, it's being a campaign function where we win elections for the people that we endorse and nominate to hold office.
Who gets to define what the role means?
The central committee.
Okay, where in the Constitution does it define the role as being the thing you described?
Well, the Constitution allows for Robert's Rules of Order to allow the group to decide on any number of different things that we do.
Mr. Hicks, just for your benefit, every side gets 90 minutes, and you're at 70 minus several minutes for Mr. Woden.
Okay.
Okay.
So, You maintained in the filing that the state central committee said that what you're doing is okay.
Yes, sir.
Effectively. Why do you believe that?
Well, you brought a challenge to the Republican Party challenging whether or not our appointed members could serve on the Central Committee. That was then taken from the Board of Elections. It was sent to the Ohio Republican Party pursuant to statute. The Ohio Republican Party Central Committee, State Central Committee, met and voted that our group was the actual group of the Republican Party in Clermont County.
Can you look at Exhibit N in the stack of exhibits that are already pre-numbered? N as in Nathan or Navy or, okay?
Okay, got it.
So very quickly, because I'm tight on time, after it says, there's a title that says the actions of the Clermont County Board of Elections. Would you acknowledge that this is a letter that you sent to the State Central Committee?
It is.
Okay. And the second paragraph within actions of the County Board of Elections, the bottom of it, it says Hicks is not the duly elected county committee secretary.
Hang on, Hicks. Where are you? Oh.
Exhibit N.
Oh. Yeah.
Second paragraph under the heading Actions of the Clermont County Board of Elections.
Okay.
And then down at the bottom, I'll read it for time purposes. If you see where I'm reading, Hicks is not a duly elected county committee secretary, is required by Ohio Res Code Section 351706, which means his listing file does not comply with Ohio law or party rules.
Okay.
Is that what you maintain to the Central Committee, to the State Central Committee?
It is. That's part of the letter.
Is there? So isn't that your only argument in the letter, that I wasn't in a position to have standing because I was not an elected member of a state as the secretary?
Well, no, there were a number of different reasons why.
Can you point out some other ones in here?
Well, I mean, the letter's pretty obvious what it says. I haven't read it in a year. I'm sorry?
Like, is there a representation that we think what we do is legal?
Well, if you want me to take a minute, I'll be happy to read it again so I can answer your questions properly. If I'm not mistaken, the statute requires that the secretary submit a list. You didn't do it properly. You're not the secretary. You didn't purport to be.
Okay. So I want to move on, but your argument was that that I pointed out was that I wasn't a proper secretary. And then I was going to have standing. I'm going to give you this one, Judge. It's the very last thing in my set, which would be not in that one, in the ones that are not marked yet, and it's going to be double. So, subsequent to the State Central Committee's April 10th meeting, did Representative Gene Schmidt, who is a committee member, take action to try to get the law changed to make what Clermont County does legal under the law?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
No.
So you have no recollection of her talking about that in meetings?
I know she never talked to me about that.
You don't recall her talking to the whole group in the meeting at which you're chair on that?
I vaguely recall some comments from her, but I never had a conversation about her before or after this thing.
So I printed this from the Legislative Services Commission analysis of the budget bill that went through where she had put this change in. It ultimately did not get into the final legislation. It ultimately then was not signed by the governor. But so I printed this directly from their document. It's a 1,200-page document, Your Honor, so I didn't print all 1,200 pages. If you look at the section that has the text on it, I printed the title page and that one page, and you see the change that she was trying to make, and it says, allows a major political party central committee to adopt bylaws that specifies that a person who's appointed to fill a vacancy of the committee is not required to be a resident. So, do you have recollection of that?
I've never seen this before.
Do you have recollection of her trying to make that statutory change?
I have a recollection. Here's, Mr. Hicks, let me explain to you what I do have. I've heard about this from other people. I've never seen this document, never had a conversation with Gene Schmidt about this law, but I have heard different people saying different things. Now, what she said in our meeting about this, truthfully, I don't remember what she said.
You don't remember. Okay. so you weren't aware then that ultimately did not become law?
No, I am aware that it didn't become law.
So I want to get real quick.
I've been told it hasn't.
In my remaining few minutes, do you think that I've suffered any harm as the result of your suspension of me?
I doubt it.
So you don't think it's harm to me that I can't represent my precinct?
Well, in that regard, absolutely not.
Why is it not harm to me?
Because you, truthfully, Mr. Hicks, if you want me to answer this, your kind of help is not productive to the Republican Party.
Then why do I get elected by huge margins as a committee?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Do you believe that it causes harm to the third party, which is the members of the Republican Party in Precinct P1P that elected me to be their voice in party affairs?
Absolutely not.
That's no harm to me. Okay. Do you believe that having a committee in which you only had legal members, in my definition of have the qualifications of office, that creates harm to you?
What do you mean?
If you were required to have a committee that only had people who met the statutory qualifications of office, does that cause harm to you?
Me personally?
To the committee.
Okay.
Why does it matter? You're not
Because I'm trying to establish the key points for a preliminary injunction about harm.
So you're instructed not to answer. I don't think that's got anything to do with it. It's about you, not them.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead. Something else.
Okay. What's in your definition? What's the definition of the word sham?
Fake.
Okay. Would you agree that, for example, if I set up a thing and I called it Clermont County Republican Central Committee and walked around telling people it was a Clermont County Republican Central Committee, put out documents and literature, that I would have made a sham organization?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Why is it relevant?
They took an issue with me saying sham appointments result in a sham organization. So I'm trying to confirm what's the range in which something becomes a sham.
Where was the allegation made?
The allegation.
They alleged you made sham statements. Where was that made?
And the filing of theirs.
Okay. Go ahead. See where it goes.
Okay. Again, what was the question?
If
Would I say it
set
was
up
a sham?
Republican Central Committee and put out literature saying this is from the Clermont County Republican Central Committee.
Sure, that's one word, yes.
Okay. So is there a criteria by which that committee would not consist of, your committee, would not consist of members with the qualification of office, that at that point it would become a sham committee? 50%, if 50% of the members did not have the qualification of office, would it then be a sham committee where it would be representing itself as what voters would think is the elected governance of the Republican Party into something different than that?
No, Mr. Hicks, that's completely wrong. Our membership is made up of elected and appointed members to the Republican Central Committee, and we function as that body.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Your turn, Mr. Wilderman.
Am I allowed to call myself?
He gets to cross first.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
Your Honor, I prefer to call the witness back during my case in chief if that's acceptable to the court.
Now's a great time for your case in chief. I can sort it out, so Mr. Hicks is going to step down and I'll put this down to your direct. Thank you, Mr. Wilderman.
Let's first talk about the September 20th, 2023 meeting at which the discipline of Mr. Hicks happened, all right?
Sure.
I believe on direct examination, cross-examination by Mr. Hicks, you mentioned that there were multiple allegations and complaints raised against him.
Correct.
Can you tell us what they were, to the best of your understanding and memory?
I can generalize. Mr. Hicks has a Facebook page on which he routinely and on a daily basis accuses any number of different Republicans of corruption or betraying the values of the Republican Party. a lot of personal, there's always frequently a lot of personal accusations about people. And those were the kinds of things that were brought up. Now, as to any specifics, this particular discussion happened in executive session of the Central Committee, and I can say that there were at least 10 to 15 different people that spoke about the behavior of Mr. Hicks. And it went far beyond the original parts of my report that identified Mr. Hicks taunting the Democrats to run against our Republican people, as well as mocking Republican donors to different candidates, which is what started the discussion. But over time, I don't know a Republican that has escaped his value system that is so off the wall that, it is just outrageous, and the party's had enough of it.
You mentioned that there was an executive session. Before going into executive session, did Mr. Hicks speak up and offer a defense of himself?
He did.
Can you tell the court what he said?
Well, I don't remember, to tell you the truth, what he said. I know that he attempted to defend his actions as truthful and appropriate, but it was a very aggressive few minutes, or 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. I don't know. He was allowed to go on, but he absolutely defended himself, and he did it aggressively and rudely.
You mentioned that.
Pardon the interruption. Is it your position that the court has jurisdiction to analyze the reasonableness of the committee's decision?
No, Your Honor. It's my position that, as set forth in my pre-hearing memorandum, and I don't mean to argue the law if you don't want me to.
No, that's why I opened the door.
Yeah, it's my position that the court does not have jurisdiction, that this whole case is an attempt to interfere and intervene in the internal affairs of a private association, the Central Committee, and that the case should ultimately be dismissed, which is something I intend to pursue after today. So, no, Your Honor, I don't believe that you do have the jurisdiction to intervene there, but the complaint brings this up. This is the substance of his complaint and what he's asking for in his preliminary injunction motion.
So you're giving me what you think is immaterial evidence in defense in case the court doesn't see it your way.
You may not see it my way. That's a possibility.
Just trying to track your arguments.
Okay.
Next question. Go ahead.
All right. You mentioned that on his Facebook page or website, Mr. Hicks attacks Republicans as being corrupt.
Correct.
Did he make those same allegations or similar allegations calling Republicans corrupt during the course of that September 20th, 2023 meeting?
Well, I recall that he did. I can't quote him, but that's part of his diatribe.
Was there a vote to discipline him?
There was.
Do you remember the outcome of the vote?
81% of the people that were there and voted to suspend Mr. Hicks of all privileges other than those that are statutorily required. So yes, the vote was taken.
After the vote, where 81% voted to suspend him as you described, was Mr. Hicks advised of the outcome of his suspension?
He was.
Was he told that he was not welcome at future meetings?
He was.
Did he nonetheless attend future meetings?
He did.
Where are the meetings held?
Republican headquarters across the street, 197 East Main Street, Batavia.
And who owns that property?
It's owned by the Masons.
And do you, not you specifically, the Republican Central Committee of Clermont County, have a lease or license to use that?
We do.
dispute that arose between the Central Committee and Mr. Hicks, and it was presented through the Board of Elections to the Republican State Central Committee.
Correct.
What was the outcome of that process?
The Republican Party followed the statute, called a meeting of the State Central Committee. We submitted our position. Mr. Hicks submitted his position. This was brought before the State Central Committee. There was a vote, and our position prevailed, and the Ohio Republican Party ruled that our committee was the recognized committee.
Thank you very much. Nothing further, Your Honor.
So back to you, Mr. Hicks. You walked
Just
us
some quick cross. You, in that meeting on September 20th, when you described it as 81% voted, do you remember how many actual members voted that? I mean, numeric, not a percentage.
I do not recall.
I believe it's in one of the exhibits. It's in the minutes for the 9/20 meeting, which are exhibits exhibit O, and the ones that were pre-numbered by me. You should have that one up there, Mr. Corcoran. I'm sorry, exhibit P. My bad. It's exhibit P for minutes.
T?
Paul.
T is
in Paul.
P. Okay. Okay, I have it.
So if you look at the second page of that, towards the bottom, it has the motion was passed. What number does it say?
It says a motion passed 56 yes to 13 no.
How many people are on the committee? Total.
Approximately 150 to 152, somewhere in that range.
So is that 81% of the committee?
No, it is not. It's 81% of the people that voted.
Now, given that I take issue with that disciplinary procedures under Robert's rules even apply, was it noticed on the agenda of the meeting that there would be a business item of disciplinary procedures against me?
No, it was not in the agenda written that there would be a disciplinary action against Chris Hicks.
Did some people know that there was going to be a disciplinary action against Chris Hicks and other people not know?
I can't say.
Okay. The positioning of that in those minutes, exhibit P at number 14, what's right above number 14? What is the bold line say?
It says next CCRCC meeting will be held on October 18th at 7 p.m.
Is it normal in your meetings to announce the next meeting and then say, now we're going to continue with some other business?
Well, typically that will be announced at the end, but I can't, I don't know.
So why wasn't this then, if it was legitimate, why wasn't it done during new business on the agenda? Why was it done after the normal time that the meeting would be over?
What's your question?
Why was it not done, if it was legitimate, up in the agenda like as a new business item, versus done at a point in the meeting when normally the meeting's over and people have left or are starting to leave?
I see. There was a report of your behavior that was made by me to the Central Committee, and a person made a motion that you should be disciplined, and it went from there. It was all pursuant to Robert's rules.
Who made the motion?
I don't recall.
So,
as chairman,
did I ever receive what we call preferred charges? Anything in writing describing to me what the charges were against me?
You received nothing in writing as far as I know.
Let's assume Robert's rules apply. Does Robert's rules require for events that you're describing that were outside of a meeting, by Facebook post that you don't like, that I had to have, for example, preferred charges, the ability to call witnesses, the ability to cross-examine? Would you deny that that's not part of Robert's rules?
I know that the process that was followed was exactly as Robert's rules prescribes.
Okay, well then I'm going to, very quickly, here's Robert's rules.
Mr. Hicks, I'm not an expert, but we have one here, so you'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to...
So you were making a representation that everything was by the
I was.
Make that representation?
Well, no, actually, before any of this came up, I, at the time, made sure I had the correct process before we went to it. But I can't, I can tell you what we did generally, but, we're looking back to September now.
Do you believe that I have a mission to destroy the Republican Party?
I do believe that.
Based on what?
Your behavior.
Like, for example? What's an opinion that I have?
Everything that you post is against the Republican Party, grossly exaggerated, defamable, and untrue.
Have I ever been charged with defamation?
No, but
Or challenged in a court action?
not yet.
Okay, so you said that I speak of Republican corruption. Have you ever heard of a man named David Hubel?
Sure.
Did your wife run against David Hubel?
She did.
For election?
Yeah.
What happened in that?
Well, actually,
Why do I care?
Because he said I say things about corruption that are untrue. His wife got elected because a corrupt politician got convicted because of me and removed from the ballot. His wife became a commissioner as a result.
okay.
So he says that it's untrue, so I'm going to correct.
That's fair. So the fact that Mr. Wildermuth didn't object doesn't mean I'm not allowed to, and I do, because I don't find this meaningful.
Okay.
And in the available time, you might want to go to something that's meaningful.
Okay. Mr. Wildermuth, and you agreed, said that the Central Committee is a private association. Under Ohio law, in the political world, what's a private association?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
What do you mean by private association?
Rules give you an opinion.
Okay. Well, a club is a private organization. The Republican Party, in most respects, is a private organization. Your organization that you started was a private organization. Young Republicans are a private organization. Those are all private organizations. I mean, the Masons are private.
So a club, like the Young Republicans,
Yes.
okay, do they have to submit their member list and their governing documents to the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections?
No, they don't.
Do they have government-administered elections?
No, they don't.
Okay, so how's the distinction then that those are private associations? So if I wanted to have a private association that's a club, I can do so. I might have to do some campaign finance reporting.
Exactly.
But I never have to report my governing documents. I don't have to participate in a government-sanctioned election. I can have my terms of office be whatever I want them to be. There's all kinds of things I can do. So how do you not see a distinction between a central committee and a private association or club?
Well, there are certain statutory requirements for the Republican Party, being a major party, who does have some functions that are in the public interest and involve the public, that being appointing vacancies.
I think my last little quick question is, you talked about me attending meetings after the ban on September 20th.
Yes.
Did you seek to have me arrested for attending a meeting on October 18th?
No.
Did you have somebody call the police to come to the meeting because of me?
Yes.
Okay, so what were you wanting them to do then?
Make a report.
Make a report, okay. Did you lobby the sheriff?
What does that mean?
Did you wish that the sheriff would arrest me?
Well, here's what I wish, Mr. Hicks. I wish you would behave like an adult when you're dealing with the Republican Party. But as far as trying to get you arrested, that's just untrue.
Now, I just want to look real quick at Exhibit I. And this I is in Irene in the stack that was pre-done by me, which is a note that both you and I received from the sheriff during the time period of that meeting. It's dated October 13th at the top.
Got it.
And what does it say?
It's to you from Steve Leahy. My office will not weaponize against any citizen or elected official. This situation is no different. If called to do so, we will respond to keep the peace and properly document the position of all parties.
Okay. Did you ask for the sheriff and the Batavia police to provide uniform details at that
I first contacted the sheriff's office to see if we could hire an off-duty police officer to provide security. I also contacted Batavia to ask them if they would. And this is the one where you came to the meeting. Okay.
So look at Exhibit G in that same stack. G is in golf, G in the same stack. That's a note from you to me. You recognize that note to me?
Yes.
And do you see there that you're, the last line, you may be subject to criminal prosecution?
Yes.
Okay, why didn't anybody arrest me that day? What was the explanation you were given by the law authorities as to why they wouldn't arrest me?
Why do I care? The fact that you have this issue doesn't mean it has any meaning to me.
I think it might go to harm that I'm experiencing.
Past harm?
Current, past, and present, future.
No, find something else. That doesn't count.
Okay.
Nothing personal. I'm not short with you. I'm trying to
All
help
right,
you.
no other questions?
You got so much time and
No other
too much
questions.
material. Thank you. You want to follow up, Mr. Williams?
Nothing further to the witness, Your Honor.
I have a couple which don't count against anybody for time purposes. First of all, the Constitution for the Republican Party has no definition of member, right?
That may be true, Your Honor. Quite truthfully, as soon as I was elected, we spent a lot of time trying to upgrade this.
Like, it's 100% obvious you're a lawyer, because we don't do well with ambiguity.
Right.
But your testimony was that the Clermont County Republican Party is the Central Committee members.
Correct.
So at most, there's 168 members of the Clermont County Republican Party.
Correct.
Other people can go to functions and you solicit them,
right.
But at least in that universe, it's 168 people right. As you define it, right?
Correct.
I want to make sure I'm following your line,
right.
Not that I'm agreeing with. Your testimony also is that when there's vacancies to the precinct committee member list,
right.
You fill them, not you personally, but the committee fills them, and they give no regard to residents in the precinct, they just give regard to the residents in the township.
Correct.
Or if they're in the city, then it'd be in the same situation, right?
Correct.
Is there any affirmation process, or is it simply up to, here it is, Lana. She said she's the person that does the filling. After she identifies the person, then what? So if I give you a handshake?
Well, the way it works is that when there's a vacancy somewhere, whether it happens by virtue of the fact that nobody runs for election or somebody resigns and moves, and all those things happen, we look to the exec for the area to find somebody in the area that can fill that vacancy. If they live there, that's our preference. If they get somebody that doesn't live there that's willing to do it, that's our second best shot.
So Miss Lana doesn't do countywide, she just does township-wide?
Only in Stone Lake Township.
So it would be the same thing in whatever number of townships or cities?
We have 16 altogether, 14 townships, 2 cities. And each of those execs then try to assist in finding someone that is willing to work in that precinct on behalf of the Republican Party.
Is there any affirmation process?
Well, once they find a person, we bring them to the meeting. They're introduced by the exec. All of the members in the Central Committee then get to ask them questions about their activity for the Republican Party or what they're willing to do. Who knows? And some of the questions are bizarre, but we do get the opportunity for everybody to ask questions, and then after the questioning is all over with, there's a vote. majority makes them a member of the central committee, an appointed member of the executive, not of the central committee, I'm sorry.
So they're not an elector as the term is defined by the revised code once there's a vacancy.
They are treated the same as the elected precinct person, with the exception of that.
Of residency.
With the exception that they don't get to participate in filling vacancies of county officials. That's the one area where it gets wonky, so we don't let them participate. I don't know that wonky's a term of art, but
We all understand it.
yeah.
So those appointed members don't have authority in what you call statutory
Correct.
duties. Does that bring up any follow-up, Mr. Hicks?
Well, so let me ask you a question then. So let's use Blair Cursor as an example. He represents precinct N. If we had a county commissioner need to get replaced, or an engineer like we did when Pat Longer was convicted,
Yes.
who would then be able to participate in that statutory function for precinct N?
No one.
So precinct N, by the process you're doing, is being disenfranchised from the statutory function of being able to appoint replacement county officials.
They're being disenfranchised, if you want to call it that, because we had no one to run, they did not elect anyone, and there's no representative in that regard, yes.
Okay, so they would, but nobody, in my Bill Shields example, where precinct D, where he's asked about rejoining, been told he can't rejoin, because it's still, precinct D in Stoneway Township would not get a vote in the appointment of a replacement county official, the one function where it becomes a public office by case law. Precinct D would not get a vote, but there's somebody that lives in precinct D who has actually come forward and asked if he could be able to be represented on precinct. Is that a correct statement?
Then he should have run and gotten elected, and then he would be able to represent that precinct.
Well, by the testimony, he tried to run. His petition was rejected by the Board of Elections, and that's why he did not get on. He had been on the committee previously.
Okay, I can't. If his petition got thrown out, that's not anything to do with our committee.
Do any of these
So, Mr. Hicks, just to carry the logic out, how to argue, you're saying if they're appointed, but they reside, then magically they do get the powers. Magically, they get the powers from the people that do the appointment when they weren't elected to start with.
What I'm saying is that he's pointing out that there's a fundamental flaw in what they're doing, because the statutory function that's very clear on the appointing replacement officials, the most dramatic statutory
I'm
function.
following the argument.
When they do appointments of people who do not live in the precinct, it permanently for that term blocks that precinct from ever being able to have a vote in an appointment of a statutory official.
Right, but so if they don't have an elector run, the seat sits empty then for 4 years.
No, somebody else who lives there, like
But
we
if
could
the
go
party
get
that-
somebody that lives there to come forward.
I'm arguing, it's just to flush the argument
Okay.
out. Just to flush the argument
Yes,
out.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so they could leave the seat open,
Or they
even if there's an elector. But you're saying if they appoint an elector, then magically they do get all the privileges, even though the voters didn't pick them, right?
If they appoint an elector, Your Honor, just like if I got appointed to a school board. Okay, once you're in,
Yeah.
but when you're legally appointed, meeting the qualifications of office, then it's as if you were elected. And obviously, it's an accommodation made in the law because there are timeframes when somebody dies in office and it's not feasible to have new election and so forth.
It's not even feasible, it's not provided for.
Right.
If they died 3 days after the term started, it sits open. There's no election procedure in midterm. It just sits open. I'm just pointing out the weakness in the argument and the statute, both.
But Your Honor, if a precinct is open, nobody ran, then that's in the statute. The rules are in the statute for filling that vacancy with somebody who does meet. Just like if somebody didn't run for school board.
It doesn't say resident. It's your argument. It doesn't say resident.
It says that there can't be more than one person from a precinct says that if you are removed from the precinct, you can't be on the committee. That creates a vacancy. So people that don't live in their precincts are removed from the precinct. People, when Blair Terpster and I are two people from the same precinct, so there's absolutely clear, and in one of my filings I also submitted an Attorney General opinion to that effect, that it's a continuing requirement that the person that is on the committee has to have the qualifications of office.
So I took away from your ability to ask questions because, like, I often probe the strengths and weaknesses of the arguments. Like, if you really want to say it's all about the people have the authority, once the people don't put somebody up, nobody else gets authority either. Here they have a provision to delegate that.
If I may comment, Your Honor, if I use the example of the school board, the people that have the authority are either the other school board members, but they have to appoint somebody consistent with the qualifications of office. Or, in that case, I don't mean to get into nuance, those nonpartisan races, you can appoint a committee that can appoint a replacement. But keeping it simple here is that if a county, so they can appoint a replacement. In the case of a county official, the central committee appoints a replacement. If that has to be consistent, they can't appoint a commissioner from Kentucky to Clermont County. Has to be consistent with the qualifications of office. And when they do this differently, for example, in my precinct, Blair Terpstra gets a vote equal to mine. Actually gets a vote. I don't get a vote. When he was repudiated by the voters in the precinct. So my vote, I get the harm of my vote being diluted. Now I get the harm of my vote being none. And so now the only person that's from precinct P1T that gets a vote in the affairs of the Republican Party through its governing coordinating committee in Clermont County is a person that lost by 2/3 vote in an election for representing those people.
On things that don't matter.
I actually would say, Your Honor, the things other than appointing county officials are the things that do matter. Because they have to do with the policy, direction, spending,
100%.
all those things related to.
But their argument is that's politics, not law. And in the realm of Mr. Wildermuth's arguments, I'm not supposed to care. It doesn't matter to courts, the internal decision-making process, because that's the separation of powers and the freedom of association. So they would say you still have a vote on anything that matters and no vote on everything that doesn't matter.
May I
make that argument?
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. So you refer to internal disputes. I believe that the Ohio system is elegant and it's constitutional and it's stood in other states because it's basically the simple premise that the members of the party or the people that vote in the party's primary, they get to select a governing organization. There's rules about that governing organization that have nothing to do with the government interfering with the internal decisions. The fact that they have to submit their member list to the Secretary of State doesn't make them endorse certain candidates, doesn't make them spend money certain ways, doesn't make them believe in certain policy positions. And I think that's the distinction here. I actually think the Ohio system is an elegant system that is based on a very fundamental premise of our country of self-representation, and that people have the right, even if Mr. Corcoran hates me, doesn't like what I say, doesn't like what I put on Facebook, the people in my precinct, I've stood the test of time getting reelected there, and they know me. Believe me, they know me. And my point is, I represent a part of the Republican Party that's fed up with business as usual in the Republican Party. I'm the Matt Gaetz type person. And so Mr. Corcoran, because he can't deal with me, and he doesn't like my positions, and they start to have effect because people want to make changes, he seeks to figure out a way to stifle my First Amendment rights, which I agree with the committee, now making some argument that somehow this is critical to his First Amendment rights. So I think that the point here is that either we're going to say, or the court's going to say, that, part of the price of being a major party is that there's a whole bunch of things you need to do that have nothing to do with your internal decisions. They have nothing to do with making you do anything. They're administrative things. Or the court's going to say, these things don't matter. And so then what happens? So now the State Central Committee has mandated by statute to have 33 men and 33 women. Can they just say we're not doing that? Can we start to say we're not going to use your petition, Mr. Secretary of State? We're not going to have 2- and 4-year terms? Where does it end in terms of the picking and choosing what statutes we're going to follow? And I don't find that the stipulation legislation and statute that's obvious in the Constitution to me, may not be you, that you have to have a qualified elector. This isn't some government intrusion. Frankly, doing these appointments like the husband of somebody who wants to be a judge to stack votes on the committee, that's the thing. That's the thing that should not be happening. And so ultimately, what's going to happen here is one side or the other is going to be validated. And if their side's validated, then we're basically going to say that the entire structure of politics in Ohio that nobody's complained about that much till Jeff Corcoran, because he doesn't like me, is unconstitutional. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like, to the extent that you just personalize this, let me walk you back to say, I'm a blind lady on the top of the courthouse who's going to follow the rules. Because most people think it's what I want to do is how we end this. When in fact, my personal opinions, my frail mind, my limited knowledge are not meant to get in the way. So I'm going to try to give you not my answer, but the law's answer. So I get what you just did. You went from institution to person. And I always walk that back. You're not the first person that's personalized. Because I don't get the freedom to do what the heck I want when I want to do it. I have the duty to follow the rules. And I'll try to. That doesn't mean I'll get it right. It just means I'll try. Now, Mr. Wildermuth might want to chime in just because he tends to want to chime in. So your turn.
I think I'll remain quiet for the moment, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is this a new person? I get it. You don't have to say a thing. You should probably step down, Mr. Corcoran. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Judge.
I'm pleased. Thanks. We should flip the tables now, Mr. Wildermuth, just to let you bring forward whatever it is you want to bring forward. So I have some of your testimony. What else do you have?
I'll call Byron Baxter to the stand, Your Honor.
Raise your right hand, sir.
Are you a lawyer, Mr. Baxter?
No, sir.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You may be seated. Thank you.
And name and address, please.
Byron Baxter, 1322 Boat Run Lane, New Richmond, Ohio.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilder.
All right. Mr. Baxter, tell us a little bit about your educational background, if you would, please, after high school.
Pertaining to this matter, I am one of 12 professional parliamentarians credentialed in the state of Ohio by the National Association of Parliamentarians.
Can you explain the process that you went through to achieve that, and the education and training you received?
The process probably goes 9 to 10 years back. The actual credentialing takes a matter of 4 to 5 years. I was very fortunate in the state of Ohio. We have a tremendous stable of experienced parliamentarians who serve as mentors. And I had 2 of the best.
What does it mean to be a parliamentarian?
A parliamentarian, the basic meaning is you're going to help in meetings so they are conducted properly and efficiently. Generally, a parliamentarian in a meeting advises the presiding officer, and that's it.
I'd like to make an objection, but is this man being presented as an expert witness?
No, I'm not taking him that way. Everybody can have an opinion. Unless, of course, I misread you.
I'm just trying to establish that he's an experienced parliamentarian, and I'm working up to the meeting.
You're not going to ask him to evaluate somebody else's work.
I'm going to ask him to explain the process that happened on September 20th.
Minutes, so I saw him in the middle of it all.
Yeah, I think that's the only meeting.
Could I make
It's a fact witness.
Could I make a clarification?
Sure.
I do not serve as parliamentarian for the Clermont County Republican Party. They are not a client. I am a member of the organization.
Very good. And that's what I was going to turn to next. You are, tell us how you became a member of the Republican Central Committee.
Originally, I was appointed 2010, some time ago. After that appointment, I then ran in subsequent elections and was elected.
All right. Do you hold office?
I do.
What is your office?
Vice Chairman of the Central Committee.
How long have you been vice chairman?
Since the last organization meeting, so that's what, 2 years?
I want to turn to a meeting of the Republican Central Committee that was held on September 20th of 2023, at which there was a disciplinary proceeding against Mr. Hicks. Were you present at that meeting?
I was.
Can you explain for the court how the discipline came up, how it was brought to the attention of those at the meeting?
The sequence of events, in my opinion, was that the chairman of the Central Committee had received social media posts and other things like that made by Mr. Hicks, and the members, along with those posts, were complaining. They were complaining that Chairman Corcoran was taking no action to protect the Central Committee, and that he had a responsibility to take action. And I will just point out, as a presiding officer, he does not have the authority to do so. Only the body, only the assembly has the authority to take action. So to present what was forwarded to him, the social media post that had been forwarded to him, was presented. And this is rightfully, this is not new business, by the way. This is rightfully under announcements, because all he is doing is he's making information known to the assembly so that they understand this is the complaint that he has been receiving. There are multiple complaints, but doggone it, it is not the authority of the presiding officer to do anything. But it is the duty of a presiding officer to dispense pertinent information so the assembly is aware. And that is what has happened. That is what has happened at that meeting.
All right. And what was the substance of the information that Mr. Corcoran presented to the membership?
The substance was negative comments about the Central Committee, its officers, its individual members, etc. Pejoratives. There's a long history of that with Mr. Hicks.
So there's been some talk about Robert's Rules of Order. Do you agree that the Constitution of the Central Committee adopts Robert's Rules of Order?
Yes, it is in the Constitution. It is in what Mr. Hicks provided, that copy of the Constitution, yes.
All right. So it would be fair for us to understand that Robert's Rules of Order were applied and in use at this particular meeting?
Yes, that is correct.
So up to this point, you've told us that Mr. Corcoran presented the information he had been provided. What happened after he did that?
I may not have the exact words correct, but words to the effect that Mr. Hicks affirmed that what the substance of what was in the videos that were shown was correct. That is exactly what they were his. That is exactly what he felt, exactly what he said. And he went further, saying that there was even more corruption than what was shown.
Anyone in particular that he accused of corruption? So, for example, Republicans in the Central Committee.
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. The video screens were behind us, so I did not see what was presented. I was looking straight at the folks in the assembly.
But he was accusing other Republicans of corruption.
Oh, yes.
Did other members come forward during the meeting to present complaints about Mr. Hicks' behavior?
During the meeting, no, not to me. When the gavel comes down, you follow what's on the agenda.
Right. Now, at some point you went into executive session. Is that right?
That is correct, and that is proper procedure according to Robert's Rules of Order.
All right. And at that point, was Mr. Hicks asked to leave the executive session?
I believe Mr. Hicks first was afforded the opportunity to speak in defense of his actions, which he did. And yes, after he did that, He then was removed from the hall until the disciplinary proceedings had been disposed of.
And it was during his defense that Mr. Hicks made further allegations of corruption by Republicans.
Yeah, I can't tell you what specifically they were. As a general statement, yes, it was a continuation.
All right, so we're up to executive session. Give us a general understanding of what transpired during the executive session.
One of the things that happens in executive session is the penalty is established, and that is totally up to the purview of the assembly. They could have decided that he will be asked to apologize and say, "I'll never do it again," or as they ended up, the penalty was, of course, to indefinitely suspend all rights of membership not associated with, as Mr. Corcoran said, the statutory fulfillment. So that's what happens. The testimony and the comments made in executive session are not public. And folks are warned ahead of time that what happens in executive session must stay confidential. You have a large number of people in the assembly, so that's in any organization. It's difficult, for people to hold their tongue, but they're honor bound to do so. And anyone that violates that is an egregious violation of the rules. And when you read how egregious it is, it's subject to a person being expelled from an organization, which did not happen, has not happened.
So based on your experience as a parliamentarian and your presence at that meeting, do you believe that Robert's Rules of Order were complied with at that September 20th, 2023 meeting?
I do.
Mr. Baxter, that's all I have. Thanks very much.
Go ahead, Mr. Hicks. Thank
So you described as Robert's rules, and I like the question of they were complied with. For the example that you gave, that everybody described as I had social media posts people don't like. I made accusations on social media of corruption. What is the Robert's rules? By the way, I'm not believing that this is even valid, but I just want to explore. If Robert's rules were valid, what would be the proper process?
The proper process was exactly what was followed. We can't confuse the two.
I don't want you to just keep telling. It's kind of like answering the question with that question. I'm asking, what are the steps of a proper process?
The proper process is outlined in Section 61, but not the section that you provided. The proper process says when an offense occurs at a meeting, you warn the offending member. You try to ask them to come to order. You instruct them to stop interrupting. Those instructions must be complied with. That is the authority of the presiding officer. That is the only means by which an organization can, in fact, maintain order in their own assembly. To not follow the instructions of the chair is a violation.
So I'd like to introduce another exhibit, just for purposes of this, and it would be Exhibit X. Thank you. In line, and Your Honor, you do not have a copy of this, so I'd like to approach the
I'll try it, yeah. Come on up, thank you.
Oh, you do have it.
Oh, you got it.
Where is it? Oh, this one?
Yes. So you mentioned it was Section 61. So assuming Robert's Rules apply, you said it wasn't the section that I provided, which is offenses elsewhere than in a meeting and trials. Offenses elsewhere than in a meeting and trials. So what do you maintain was the proper process?
The section that comes before this, offenses at a meeting.
So if you go look in the packet, if you have it up there, Byron, of the minutes of the meeting, which is Exhibit P. Section 14 of Exhibit P is involved. It says there, Chairman Corcoran introduced allegations and indicated he would go into executive session. So what's the offense I committed in the meeting? Like, I threw a chair, I punched somebody.
What is your question?
What is the offense I committed in the meeting?
You violated the rules of debate, the rules of decorum. You spoke ill of the party as a whole.
So if Donald Trump came in and spoke ill of Nikki Haley, that would be, or the RNC. If Donald Trump came in and spoke ill of the Republican National Committee, he would be subject to discipline?
I don't think that is germane to the Central Committee. However, what is germane for a member of the Central Committee is a principle called duty of loyalty and allegiance. You cannot speak ill of the committee itself. Furthermore, you cannot question or attack the motives and character of another member, either by innuendo or insinuation. Period. That language is not ambiguous.
So I'm a bit confused because I would think that those things that you just said are not allowed are fundamental elements of American politics. That's what politics is it not?
What we're discussing is the framework of what happens within a meeting. When the gavel comes down, and the gavel comes down, you're proposing that your First Amendment rights are intact.
So if somebody says we're spending $20,000 on X, and I as a member, an elected member to represent my precinct, said, I think we got to be out of our minds, crazy, insane to spend money on X, that's not permitted?
If it's part of debate, it is. If the matter has been decided, no member may speak illy or disparagingly against an action that has been adopted prior.
So,
that would be a violation of the rules of decorum.
So is a gentleman named Tim Rudd part of the committee?
I believe so.
Okay, and is he running for county recorder?
I believe so.
Was he endorsed for county recorder?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? So,
who was he running against?
What's her face? Marsha Coley. Okay. Marsha Coley. Thank you, Jeff.
I can't remember.
So is Tim Rudd not allowed to speak ill of the committee that they made a bad decision in endorsing Marsha Collier in a primary over him? Does he have to embrace that decision and have a duty of loyalty to tell everybody they should vote for Marsha Collier?
He cannot make a disparaging remark about the committee. The merits of the question can be addressed. But using a derogatory comment about the committee would be out of order.
Would you agree that the entire event on September 20th, mind you, I don't believe that Roberts was applied in this situation, so I'm not, but that would you, I think we've already heard, but I want to make sure you agree it was not on the agenda that was provided to members.
I agree.
Okay, so it was not noticed to them that there would be a disciplinary action.
Previous notice was not given because it cannot be given. When you have something that emanates from an action taken at the meeting, you can't give previous notice of it.
But help me to understand, didn't Mr. Corcoran have videos and things ready to play? So he didn't know that this was going to happen when he had videos and screens behind him where he was going to do this at the very end of the meeting after the announcement of when the next meeting was?
I don't believe Mr. Corcoran made a motion. I believe the motion came from a member of the assembly.
Okay, so would you agree that proper process, whether disciplinary or not, is whether part 1 or part 2, is that somebody would make a motion of the charges?
You say charges. You're going to cause. And that goes to a trial, which is what you provided documentation from Robert's Rules of Order. But that is for actions outside of a meeting.
Well, weren't the actions that Mr. Corcoran put up on the screen all actions outside the meeting? And then you're saying that me standing up to respond to them is the basis for then the action? Isn't that like what happened to General Flynn?
I can't speak as to what happened to General Flynn.
Okay. Okay. Did I get any chance to present evidence?
You were given the opportunity to speak in your defense before anyone else was allowed to speak. And that is what is prescribed in Robert's Rules of Order. And it was followed.
Well, isn't what's prescribed in Robert's Rules of Order, assuming, I know you dispute this, but that the Facebook posts that were brought up were things that happened outside of a meeting. Doesn't Robert's Rules of Order say that it should have been noticed on the agenda? I had a right to a trial. I could call witnesses. Isn't that what Robert's Rules of Order says?
It says that in the case of valid cause for removal. This specific motion was made after the presentation, and when there was discussion and debate, whether it was civil or not is not the point. That is the point at what it was made. Therefore, it cannot be on the agenda, because what was on the agenda was the presentation by the chair of what had been sent to him with the accompanying demands that he was failing in his duties, and he was supposed to do something.
So if I had not been there, Byron, I wouldn't be suspended, because the only reason I'm suspended is because I was present?
That's a good question, because you have to be afforded the opportunity to speak first in debate before it's considered.
So let me go to the Constitution document. Do you have a copy of your Constitution up there?
Let me interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Look at the official timekeepers. Do you have other witnesses, Mr. Willis?
No, Your Honor.
So I can afford Mr. Hicks a little bonus time, if you will, just because you have it available.
Well, that's up to your discretion, Your Honor.
Appreciate the deference. Go ahead.
So in the Constitution document, which is Exhibit T, if we wrote the numbers, it was one of the unnumbered ones. If you go to where your numbers at the bottom, you find the party's number, the committee's numbers, CCRCC 125, CCRCC 125, and you see that it has Section 2 meetings, and you see B, and I found the Robert's Rules of Order part, and it's the last, I believe it's the last sentence in Section B. Can you read that last sentence that starts the Rules of Order?
The rules of order for meetings of the Central Committee shall be Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, insofar as those rules do not conflict with the provisions of the Ohio Revised Code or these bylaws.
And are you aware of any provision in the Ohio Revised Code for the suspension of a committee member?
No.
Are you aware of part of the Ohio Revised Code that deals with, for lack of a simpler word, actions a committee member can take that cause them to lose their seat, like move out of their precinct or die?
No.
You're not aware of that? Okay. So Mr. Corcoran spoke to the four reasons: death, failure to elect, removal from precinct, or resignation. You're not familiar with that there's statutory basis for what causes a Central Committee elected official to lose their seat?
I revised that answer. Yes, I am familiar with that.
Is one of those things we don't like what he says on Facebook, or we don't like his comments outside of a meeting?
No.
So what do you think, just asking your view, in your view that there's these duties and you can't criticize a party or you can't criticize a Central Committee and be a member of it, if electors decided to start electing people like me, who are very critical, I know, very critical, then it's the right of the other people that other precincts elected to say the people that elected somebody to be critical, they don't get a voice. We can just arbitrarily decide, even though they elected this person to represent them, if we don't like what they say, then we can decide, people who are not from that precinct can decide that that person will not be able to have certain votes, either completely or partially.
Objection, it's argument, not a question.
Did you find a question in there?
No, sir, but I can answer if you want. I'll make up something.
So you did find a question. I'm going to sustain the objection simply because it was as much argument as it was a question, and I'm going to ask you to reframe to something that's like shorter and narrower.
Do you believe that the party members in a precinct have a right, without interference from other members in other precincts, to select who represents them
Yeah, you're speaking to the appointment process, correct?
No, I'm speaking to I'm an elected member. So in multiple elections, by large margins, my precinct has elected me to represent them on the committee. Do you believe that it's okay for other members of the committee to deny people in precinct P1P from having the person they elected represent them in the affairs of the Clermont County Republican Central Committee?
I believe the question is not framed correctly, Your Honor. I understand the point. We're getting back to the elector and the electing precinct. However, the way I read this is pretty simple. That is a guaranteed right in the Ohio Revised Code for the committeemen to be elected by the electors that are registered in that precinct for the term, in the case of which was established earlier, for a term of 4 years for the Clermont County Republican Central Committee. However, when they exercise what's called failure to elect, their right to elect has been exhausted. And now that process belongs to the private organization, the Central Committee, and they are not the electing body. They are the appointing body. And as has been pointed out in the documents supplied by Mr. Hicks, there is a process in the revised code for that appointment to fill vacancies. And was it 4 reasons?
Let me interrupt you. My question had nothing to do with
Let me finish so I can follow it.
The reasons cited are correct. As far as resignation, death, move out, all of those things are correct. But it's also clear that it is the assembly that is the appointing body, and they are not an electing body. And that is paramount to what we're talking about. They have the authority, and as we see in other parts, they can make their own rules.
Are you finished?
I'm finished.
My question had nothing to do with appointments. I'm an elected member, Byron. I'm not an appointed member. My question was, do the people of precinct P1P, who are Republican primary voters and members of the party, have the right, do you believe that they have the right to have the person they want to represent them, even if Mr. Corcoran doesn't like the views of that person?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion, and he's answered it.
My answer remains the same, Your Honor. They do have the right.
Then don't repeat it.
They do have the.
It's duplicative. I got it. I'm actually writing a lot of notes over here. Helps me later. Next question.
Did you originally tell people that I was suspended for actions inside the meeting, and that's why I didn't have a trial or ability to call witnesses?
That is correct.
So you originally told people that I was suspended for actions. I'm sorry, I might make sure I said it right. Did you originally tell people that I was suspended for actions outside the meeting, like my Facebook post and my political comments?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So from the beginning, the issue was, you believe in the meeting, was that I did some behavior in the meeting after Mr. Corcoran introduced allegations, which is what the minutes say. That is what then caused it to be an action of mine in the meeting, and that's why I wasn't due a trial?
Correct.
What were the actions specifically?
You violated the rules of debate and decorum. You interrupt people, which is not.
What were the specific actions then?
So he disproved.
You asked me a question.
You didn't let him answer.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And then we're going to wrap.
The specifics I can't answer. That's a question best asked to the gentleman that made the motion.
Who made the motion?
I believe it was Dennis Exlinger from Wayne Township.
So I direct you to look at the minutes. It says Dennis Exlinger made a motion to move into executive session. Who made the motion of the allegations?
I don't believe there was a charge of allegations. I believe the motion was that disciplinary sanctions be levied or imposed against Mr. Hicks.
That's not what the minutes say. That's not what the audience says.
Then that's my recollection. The minutes are the official record. I recall differently.
Did you participate in the meeting where these minutes were approved?
Would that be October?
Yeah, October 18th.
No.
Okay. Would you have proposed a change to the minutes?
I
Why
would.
does that matter? He doesn't have
you were there. Okay, no further questions.
Mr. Waterman.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thanks, Mr. Becker.
Thank you.
Any objections, Mr. Waterman, to exhibits Paul, Edward, Tango, Umbrella, B-Boy, Victor, Walter, X-Ray, and Iris?
Can I go through those a little more slowly? The first one was P, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't have an objection.
Your Honor, would you like me to say out of order?
I got them in the order in which they were identified.
Okay.
What was the next
So
one,
P,
Your Honor?
then the E, Edward, the precinct list. Precinct list?
I don't have an objection to it to the extent that it is what it says it is, not what it was purported to be during the...
I'm just trying to find out what's admissible here. You don't have to object. You don't have to read anything. I'm just trying to find out where you object.
No, I think the problem we had with that, it was represented to be the most recent up-to-date list at this time. It's from July.
Which goes to weight. So you want an objection?
No.
The T is the Clermont County Republican Party Constitution.
No objection.
And then U is various provisions of the revised code and the Ohio Constitution.
No objection.
And then B-Boy is the candidate petition for Mr. Terpstra.
I guess my objection to that is relevance.
I refer to it as states as an elected office.
Yeah. So I'll note your objection and admit it. Endorsement policy, Victor is the old version versus the new version.
No objection.
W is proposed legislation.
I don't believe this was ever authenticated. Maybe it's self-authenticating. I'm not sure about that.
It's not, and it's not admitted. Like what a legislator might want to do someday along the way really has never been my concern. I is email from the sheriff.
No objection.
And X is a portion of Robert's rules.
No objection.
So you identify the exhibits will be admitted except for W.
Did you mention P, minutes of suspension of the September 20th?
Yeah, that's the first one you came up with.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
P, Paul? Yep.
Sorry.
The court will take the matter under advisement and issue a written decision. It's not dispositive of the pending litigation, so whether a preliminary injunction is issued or not just takes us through the next step, and then we go to further scheduling on the merits. So, anything else, Mr. Waterman?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Hicks, anything else?
So you feel that the briefing is adequate on statements of around harm, the requirements of a Your Honor?
With regard to briefing, the only thing I would suggest is make sure whatever you sent me actually made the clerk's file. There was some question from the staff whether it was something that got emailed or fax filed. Just make sure, like I'm getting a lot of materials,
Yeah.
but that's not the record. So you want to look at the docket and make sure that whatever I got made the official docket. But because I don't know that. I'm assuming it happened. It was helpful from both sides to give me the exhibits and give me materials. With regard to some materials, like Mr. Waterman, thank you. You took good notes about where my curiosity was and gave me a stack, which won't be considered, but it was like you being responsive because I wanted these here in case we got there. So I'm not going to look at exhibits that nobody identified or marked, obviously, but you submitted materials. They won't be a part of the discussion. There's nothing more frustrating to me is to get here and have half the cards when someone else to play with the full deck. So thank you to the witnesses, court staff, And the parties will go ahead and go off the record, and I'll get a decision out.